parts of the universe. You could have creatures that come from the interior of the earth, from anywhere. From anywhere. From anywhere. From anywhere.
Hey, welcome back to Blurry Creatures. Thanks so much for tuning into our podcast. Week after week, we're getting more emails from you guys talking about how much you enjoy the show, how much it means to you. And this week, we're going to have Tim Alberino back on. And he's been a repeated guest on the show many times. And we have some exciting news that we're going to be doing. We're going to be at his conference coming up in Nashville. So we'll be talking about that on this episode. But Tim's great. Tim is super generous with his time with us. So go to his website, get a ticket if you want to see us hanging out with him at his conference here in Nashville, and support what Tim's doing. He's a super knowledgeable guy and becoming a good friend of ours. So go get yourself a ticket. And if you want to support Blurry Creatures, head over to blurrycreatures.com/members and support what we're doing. I spend all my time editing, making memes, photoshopping, videos, just content. If you like that, if you like what we're doing, we're getting closer to our goal of members. So we have a chat coming up tonight. That's one of the bonus perks, as well as early episodes. And we've got some members episodes in the can. I just have to edit them, and they'll be in your ears soon. So can't say thanks enough for everyone who supports the show and is on board with what we're doing. Let's get on to Tim. Thanks so much.
The history of our Earth is so different from what we can imagine.
The Smithsonian, that if they found out about a large skeleton somewhere, was to go get it.
I'm going to assume at least one person is right, because if one person's right, it busts the paradigm.
It all goes back to the fallen cherub. And the problem with the modern day church, they have a very truncated view of the supernatural.
This backdrop that's just pregnant with all kinds of meaning associated with this Mount Hermon event.
Welcome to Blurry Creatures.
And this guy defects from the kingdom. That's a big deal.
All right, welcome back to the show, Tim. We love having you on. You and Dr. Jed Burton are fighting for the most returned guests on Blurry Creatures.
It's fight to the death.
We've talked about your book, Birthright, and you got some cool stuff coming up. You're going to be in our backyard here in Tennessee.
That's right.
So welcome back to the show, Tim, and maybe tell listeners what you got going on before we kick off this episode.
Well, it's great to be back with you guys. I always have fun conversing with you. I am doing a conference from May 6th through 7th in Nashville, Tennessee.
Let's go.
The conference is called the Birthright Conference, and we're going to be discussing transhumanism, aliens, UFOs, and the Bible. And I'll be speaking a lot at the conference. It is my conference, after all.
I would hope so.
And I'm going to be joined by Joe Allen, who's an expert on transhumanism. And maybe some people in your audience will recognize Joe Allen from Steve Bannon's War Room podcast. Joe is Steve's correspondent on transhumanism. So, and I've been talking to Joe. You know, I've gotten to know Joe over the last month, and he's absolutely brilliant. I literally don't know anybody anywhere who knows as much about transhumanism, who is as well versed in transhumanism as Joe Allen. It's hard to know more about the topic than that guy.
Wow.
So he's got some amazing information he's going to be presenting at the conference. And there's likely going to be some other people also showing up to the conference that I might be announcing later. So
let's go.
Right here in our backyard, Nathan.
Yeah. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, very excited.
And we're going to be there.
We are going to be there, Nate.
We're going to be there.
So the Blurry Bros are going to be at the conference.
Exactly right,
Yeah.
Tim. You can count on us. My dad's going to be real jealous. My dad's reading your book, Tim, and he's like, I'm gonna let him know. Yeah, he's a slow reader. Come on. He's listening right now too. So hey,
come on, Ed. Pick it up.
There's a lot of depth in that book. He's taking his time. He's trying to digest it all.
It's
Bring him to the conference.
No, I need to.
Let's go.
Absolutely.
By the way, you can get tickets to the conference for the audience. I can get tickets to the conference by going to my website, timothyalberino.com. You'll see a banner. Follow the banner. It'll take you over to the page where you can purchase your tickets. We're also doing a VIP dinner event the night before. So on the evening of the 6th, the conference is the 7th. This special VIP event is happening the night before. It's a dinner. It's going to be me and my guests, including Luke and Nate. And so that's available also. It's only going to be 30 guests. So if you want to be a part of that, the VIP dinner event, you can purchase that as well on the same site. And general admission is included in that, as well as some preferred seating and some other things. So if you want to go, I mean, tickets are going to go fast for this thing. And so if you want to go get your tickets.
Get them.
Yeah, let's do it.
Come on, get them. Come hang with Nate and I and Tim, and
come on down,
dude. I'm pumped. Dude, we get to hang in person. This is gonna be fun.
My favorite thing to do at these conferences is to hang out with people.
Yeah.
I enjoy speaking, but I really like talking to people, meeting people, and hanging out, and smoking cigars or whatever else. And so this is a great opportunity for your audience if they want to meet you guys and meet me and meet Joe Allen and the other people who are going to be coming. And I don't live in Nashville, but I hear it's beautiful in May. So
let's go.
Yeah, it's right. Yeah.
That's the time to be here.
It is right before all of the humidity rolls in. You start sweating out your weight in water.
Yeah, Montana, I can have 6 feet of snow in the beginning of May. You never know.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we got to get up there too, Nate. I want to get to Montana to do some fishing, so we gotta go see Tim. We'll do like a swap. You come down and see us. We'll go see you.
You want to catch some trout and rivers around here? I'm your man.
Let's go. There's some megaliths in Montana too. Try to get that lady on the show.
I've heard that, and I've had people send me lots of images, and local people talk to me about it. And it's only about an hour and a half drive from my house.
Gotta go.
And I haven't gone there. I was going to go last year, and I just never got around to it. But it's hard to tell from images if what you're looking at are megaliths or if they're artificial, if it's an artificial construction or if it's a natural formation. You have to go and you have to really take a good look at it. It's a good idea also to bring a geologist with you, and that way you can rule out the natural origin. So I have no idea if there are megaliths. I'll say this: if those are megaliths, they're huge. They're like on the scale of Sacsayhuaman in Peru. So if those are megaliths, they're massive, and it would be quite the discovery. So I do plan on going over there this year and taking a look. Although I have to be honest with you, I'm kind of doubtful that they are. My first impression is that they're naturally occurring.
There's definitely some that look like dolmens, and there's this girl, Julie Ryder, trying to get her on the show. She's got it's like Megaliths in Montana or something website. She's been doing study for years, trying to get her on the show. But she's like, you have to come to Montana to interview me. I'm like,
And then
come fishing with Tim Alberino and then go interview with this lady.
Yeah. So we'll have to go hang out with Tim and then
fishing in megaliths.
What she's really saying is she's going to kidnap Nate. So don't send him there alone. The little people. Hey, so Tim, it's great to have you back and have you on. And you talked. It's interesting your spiel on what the conference is going to be about. Transhumanism. We've talked about transhumanism, aliens. We've talked about that, and UFOs. But having you back, one of the things I really want to talk about that was in the news, especially in December, and we haven't touched at all, was the NASA revelation, shall we say, that they hired 24 theologians in a NASA-funded program to essentially assess or try to figure out how the populace would react to disclosure or contact, right? And we know that there's been this slow but really picked up disclosure by our government of UFOs, from the acknowledgement to these Tic Tac videos and what the Navy is now saying. And so it's seeping out, but this was especially interesting considering it was this Princeton-funded study with the world's major religions. And I really want to talk with you about this because we've covered a lot of the things around this, but this seems to hit like right into that narrative, right? And Nate, we talked about this with, it's come up a few times in our talk. I remember we had old Scott Walter on, he basically just spit it out there and was like, you know, he was saying, oh, they're already here and they want to, you know, they're going to make sure we don't destroy each other. It's that same narrative, I don't know if it's ancient aliens or whatever it may be, but there's this narrative. So Tim, I want to just unwrap some of this with you because this was in the news. This is not just a fringe topic. This was on a number of major news outlets saying that there was some disclosure that this had happened, and they're collecting, you know, who knows what kind of clergy, but they're collecting this clergy to essentially advise on this imminent contact.
Well, there's some misunderstanding about this incident that's been getting fact checked all over the place. I think I retweeted or shared something on Instagram or Twitter. By the way, I'm back on Twitter. I haven't really announced it. I just sort of quietly came back on Twitter. So if people want to follow me on Twitter, they can do that. Again, I shared or retweeted an article discussing this topic that was posted by Joe Rogan like a month ago. And I got this notice, and I think it was Instagram. I can't remember if it's Instagram or Twitter. I think it was Instagram. And I got this notice that I might have, how did they say it? I might have retweeted, you know, it was telling me you may have retweeted misinformation or something, which was weird that they would like tell me that. And it was the Joe Rogan. It was the article that Joe Rogan had posted. And so what they're debunking, the debunkers out there now, all the major newspapers. I got an article in front of me here from the Associated Press that's debunking the NASA claim. It's true that the details, most people are getting the details wrong about this story because NASA didn't directly hire theologians. Okay. NASA didn't directly hire theologians. NASA operates like, you know, NASA's a quasi-government organization. So they operate like the government. They hire,
Some general advice that I like to give to new streamers at the beginning is the fact that a lot of streamers set their expectation of themselves in the bar really, really high. There's nothing wrong with having goals and wanting to put on a really good broadcast, but everybody starting out sucks behind the camera, sucks behind the microphone. Of course, there are going to be some people that are naturally more charismatic or have better social skills just because that's kind of how they are.
I'm an artist. People don't understand me.
The best advice I could give you, be yourself because you want people to like you for you.
A lot of people think I need to have this major, massive PC. I need to have all of these extra things. Like, you need nothing more than a game console and a microphone. That's it.
You really don't need anything too expensive. Yes, in the long term you want to invest, but just when you get started, you can get anything.
And honestly speaking, I think just having a webcam and good enough audio is enough.
If you have something that makes your stream look and sound nice and you haven't developed the skills needed to become a better broadcaster and entertainer and learned your craft, it's not going to take you that far.
A camera isn't as important as a lot of people may make it seem. Personally, I like cameras because I'm very animated. I like to make a lot of weird faces. And it's not even that I like to make the weird faces, it's just that they happen. So for me, a camera would be perfect.
You don't necessarily need two monitors at the start. If you can get a second monitor, great. It's great to have two monitors so you can have your broadcast, software over there and chat and things like that, and multitask a little bit better. But it's not necessary. You can still use your phone or an iPad or things like that, other devices that you might have that you can install the Twitch app.
Lighting matters. If you have a good webcam but crappy lighting, they're not going to be able to see it, So get that good lighting and make sure that you got a good webcam and good audio and you're fine.
Also, while you're thinking about face cam stuff, maybe you should think about if that's the route you want to go.
They contract with different companies, and they'll contract with the company for a general purpose, but the specifics of what that company does is the prerogative of the company. So NASA contracted with the Center of Theological Inquiry at Princeton in New Jersey for a program to study the potential societal impact of finding life beyond Earth. So because it wasn't NASA directly that was paying these theologians, that contracted with them directly, you have these news organizations out there working overtime to debunk this story, which is kind of ridiculous because they're missing the point. The point isn't whether or not NASA directly contracted with these theologians. The point is that NASA is interested in the potential societal impact of finding life beyond Earth. That's the point. That's the story. That's the headline.
Okay.
The details are irrelevant. I don't care if NASA hired the theologians directly or Princeton hired the theologians.
Yeah.
The end goal is the same. NASA wants to know how people are going to react to the revelation that there is extraterrestrial life, most probably sentient extraterrestrial life, because there would be no theological impact really if we discovered amoebas on Mars.
Right.
I don't think that would cause a crisis of faith in any religion. So obviously, the implication here is that we're talking about sentient extraterrestrial life, conscious, intelligent life. And one could speculate
it's real.
Why the reasons why NASA might be interested in this. But I think that there's a strong possibility that NASA knows there's going to be an inevitable disclosure in the future of intelligent, sentient extraterrestrial life. And certainly we're seeing those indications from the Pentagon. So I don't think it's any coincidence that the Pentagon has its ATIP program running, that we all know now that it was running that program, which was an investigation into aerial phenomenon, right? Unidentified aerial phenomenon, the UAPs, which are just UFOs, another way of saying UFOs, that corresponding with that study at the Pentagon, that you have NASA out there, because this happened back in 2015. So it was running concurrent with that program. NASA is consulting with theologians. Yes, indirectly, fine. Indirectly consulting with theologians through Princeton to find out how society is going to react to the disclosure of extraterrestrial life. That's the point. That's the headline. And it's just comical to me that all these, and it's not just the Associated Press. I mean, for the last 2 weeks, actually, this story came out, a month ago or so?
December,
maybe 2
like
months
right after
ago.
Christmas. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So since then, it's like all the major news organizations have been out there trying to debunk it, but they're all missing the point. They're debunking that particular detail.
That happens all the time.
Yeah, it's a technicality. Yeah, they're trying to like get you on a technicality. Like it's like dark money or something. Like you're like, they didn't wear NASA T-shirts, but NASA paid for it, right, Nate? I mean, that's
precisely, yeah.
Well, I feel like they do this all the time on fact checking on Facebook. If they find one detail that isn't correct, but if 99% of the article is true, they'll still say it's false. So I think that's just an easy way they can always get out of whatever disinformation they don't want.
Why is that, you think, Tim? Why do you think that they're trying to discredit this? Is it?
Because quote unquote conspiracy theories are running wild with it. That's why. And there's just that knee jerk reaction to want to fact check everything that gets picked up by Joe Rogan, for one thing.
Yeah.
And then by...
Okay, Joe Rogan, that guy flip-flops more than anybody I know on every subject. Just saying. As far as the UFO phenomenon, Bigfoot, the supernatural, it's all real. All of it. Scientists are just now starting to come forward and admit that it's all real, and they just can't explain it. I've experienced it, multiple times. I've seen an orb, like a dim fluorescent light, about the size of a baseball, 6 inches from my face, outside my passenger side door in the car. I've had some strange happenings in the woods, and I've seen a lot of lights. They interact with me. It's pretty amazing what it does. When that stuff starts happening to you, it changes your life.
A host of other people who these fact checkers are keeping their eye on, these semi-divine, infallible fact checkers.
Well, do you think that, like, there's certain parts of the government that want disclosure and there's other parts of the government that don't want disclosure and they're like fighting against each other?
No, I think we've talked about this before on your show, but I think that what's happening is two things are happening. One, there's an acceleration in UFO activity. The UFOs are becoming, I don't want to ascribe sentience to the craft, the beings in the craft.
That's definitely true. From what I've been told, yeah, contact and the sightings are just going to increase more and more. For me, the month of May is very special. I don't know why, but the month of May, that's when everything started turning up to 11 for me.
They're becoming more aggressive. They're taking a hostile posture. They are hovering over our secret military installations, for example, with impunity. There's nothing we can do about it. They've been harassing to some degree. You can call it harassing because any object that gets in close enough proximity to one of our battleships or one of our aircraft carriers, the military is going to consider that a harassment. Any foreign object. I mean, that's like you trying to fly a drone over a battleship that's at sea. You know, they'll shoot your drone down and then come try and catch you and imprison you for doing that. You can't do that. So, of course, UFOs, these alien entities that are navigating the craft, are harassing to some extent the U.S. military and probably other militaries around the earth, harassing them in the sense that they're following them, they're tailing them, I guess is the right terminology. They're tailing our craft, our fighters, they're tailing our aircraft and our ships. That's the first problem, is you have this more aggressive posture that the entities are taking for some reason. And then you have the other problem, which is everybody has smartphones now. The airmen and the seamen, they all have smartphones. And so I think the Pentagon at this point just realizes that there's just no way they can cover this up like they have in the past. The Pentagon has had an ironclad policy of disclosure for many decades. And just in the last few years, they have been loosening their grip, so to speak. Question of UFOs.
There's a faction war going on in the government. The grip is loosening, but it's because there's a faction war. There are more than two sides or more that are basically fighting for and against disclosure. But nobody truly wants like full disclosure.
And beginning to make admissions, astonishing admissions, regarding the reality of the phenomenon.
Well, I've heard several people come on podcasts and say, several channels saying they're working with the government, trying to disclose it. They just don't know how to do it.
Who's working with the government?
It's going to be through the people, us. People are going to start waking up, and they're all going to start coming forward with their own experiences because they're too real to ignore.
Trying to disclose.
I remember listening to Tom DeLonge from To the Stars Academy, his whole thing, and he was saying that the deep state and several government agencies have partnered with his company trying to.
No, I don't think so. Tom DeLonge's organization, I think, is faltering. Let's say. I think what he means is that he was working with individuals who were highly placed in the military, whistleblowers who were coming forth and wanting to try and encourage the government, the Pentagon, to come clean with what they know about UFOs. The problem is that, and I've said this many times, and in fact, I talked to Richard Dolan about this the other month, and I consider Richard Dolan to be the premier ufologist alive today, and he certainly knows more about the UFO cover-up by the national security state. He wrote a book. He wrote several books.
Richard Dolan knows his shit. He is one of my favorite UFO historians there are. His work, the work of Steve Mera, he's been a UFO/paranormal investigator for like 30 years or something. His work's amazing. He does a lot of videos on YouTube lately, and I've seen them all. They're amazing. He really goes in depth on it.
Volumes of books on the national security state's cover-up of UFOs. And he agrees that with my assessment that because
By the way, Tim Alberino, this guy, love this man. Great person, great human being, does a lot of good stuff for people. Anyways, yeah, he's one of the he's like the only guy that go down to Peru to investigate the pelicatas, the face peeler aliens. Yeah, he went down there and gave him a bunch of food and better equipment, some training. But yeah, that whole story freaks me out. That's like cattle mutilation territory. That shit freaks me out.
The information related to UFOs is so highly compartmentalized. One can't really say that the Pentagon is doing this or the Pentagon is doing that as it pertains to UFOs. It's individuals within the Pentagon who have a need to know regarding UFOs. And those individuals don't necessarily know more than we do. Those individuals, in some cases, probably know less than the best ufologists. They're working with the same data for the most part. Of course, they're going to have footage that we've never seen. They're going to have incidents that are not reported to the public, especially related to their aircraft and their seacraft. But for the most part, they're working with the same information we have. Then, on a much deeper level, and people refer to the deep state. Well, I think I'm going to coin a term today with you guys. I'm going to refer to a group of individuals who are part of the dumb state. And by that, I mean DUMB, deep underground military base state.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a whole nother world. That's a whole nother jurisdiction, a world of black ops and black budget projects that probably 99% of the people working at the Pentagon have no idea about. There's probably only a handful of people at the Pentagon who have access to the deep underground military base, to the deep underground military bases and the maglev train that connects them to one another, the Magneto-Leviton train, which, by the way, can go coast to coast in half an hour. We're talking New York to San Francisco in like 28 minutes or something.
Tim, how do we get on that train? We got a Bozeman. Let's get it from
real simple. We don't. That is not for us.
Bozeman and Nashville.
Drone over a battleship, and
yeah, right. You just don't get it. You don't come back
under the ground. But so what I'm trying to illustrate here is that just because it's the Pentagon doesn't mean that these are the people who really know what's going on with UFOs. The Pentagon is mainly concerned with national security threats and the defense of the United States, conventional threats.
And lining their pockets when they retire and go work for all these fucking companies like Lockheed Martin and fucking NORAD and fucking all them motherfuckers, dude. They're all in it together.
They're thinking about China, and they're thinking about Russia, and they're thinking about the other adversaries of the United States. And these days, they're thinking about quote-unquote right-wing insurrectionists probably more than those other threats. And they're not privy to the information that the private contractors have. Remember, there's something called a Freedom of Information Act. And so we still have a right, and we still have the ability as citizens to file a Freedom of Information Act. And in most cases, at least in many cases, the government has to cough up information when we do that, if it's done properly through the proper channels and if enough pressure.
Yeah, I'd like to see what happens when they do that for that whole Miami bullshit. That Miami incident with like the fucking 150 million cops that were down there.
Is brought to bear. And there's organizations out there that do this all the time. And that's how you end up getting not leaks. You end up getting admissions from the government that otherwise they would not want to make. And so how do you get around a Freedom of Information request? Well, the best way to get around that is to use private contractors. Because if the government is contracting with a private entity, let's say an entity that develops aerospace vehicles.
Lockheed Martin or something, right?
Like Lockheed Martin, that's right. So if the government is working with, or the RAND Corporation, but let's say if the government is working with Lockheed Martin, and it's within those classified projects that not only are they studying UFOs, they're way beyond studying UFOs, they're reverse engineering the recovered the crash retrievals.
Right. Bob Lazar talked about that. Yeah. About how they're
deriving technology from the crash retrievals. They're recovering the bodies, or maybe even have in the past recovered live bodies of these alien entities, the Greys mainly. So to finish this thought, if I were to file a Freedom of Information Act, file a request asking for information about the government's, is the government, and it has to be specific, it can't be general. I mean, you can't just file out of the blue some kind of a request that has nothing, really not based on anything tangible. Then you're not going to get a response from the government because no one's going to take it seriously. But if you do it right, and you're working with the right group of lawyers and you know what you're doing, the government is obliged to answer you. And so if I were to ask them, we have indications, and here are the indications spelled out in our request, that you are likely in possession of extraterrestrial materials from a crash retrieval. Well, the government has plausible deniability because they are not. It's just like NASA with these theologians. They're not directly overseeing the operation. They're contracting with a private organization.
It's like Blackwater. It's like the operations they do overseas.
Precisely.
It's mercenaries.
It's
right?
a shell game.
It's a shell game.
And so it's like, and we don't have a Freedom of Information Act that pertains to private corporations. So that's one of the primary reasons why the government contracts out its most top secret, important, and I would also add dastardly projects to these corporations. When I say dastardly, I mean projects related to things that are unethical. And I'm not even just talking about the recovery of alien crash retrievals. I'm talking about the black hole here. We talk about human trafficking and drug running and all kinds of things that probably elements of the government are involved in, from the CIA to the NSA to all the other agencies in the government doing these insidious things that if the public were to find out, we would be appalled. We would call for the dismantling of that agency. And so they hide it.
If people really knew what was going on, people would be fucking running through the streets, guns and arms, just not giving a fuck if they knew what was really going on.
Behind this wall, this dead end in terms of trying to gather information, you hit the dead end of a private corporation,
right?
And you can't go any further.
Right. Yeah, there's no leverage. There's no leverage over them to have them disclose anything. Yeah.
You don't have any right to know what the RAND Corporation is developing for the government, not only because it's top secret, but because they're a private organization and they don't have to tell you what they're doing, even though they're using taxpayer money to do it. And that's another reason why some of these agencies, part of their modus operandi to get around to circumvent some of this oversight is to try and acquire funds that don't come directly through the government, that don't come directly through the taxpayer. Because if, let's say, if the CIA can acquire its own funds, or at least, they'll get funds from the government to fund their day-to-day operations, their pencil pushers and so forth at the Bureau, right? Or the FBI, for example. But if they want to conceal operations, even from Congress, then the best way to do that is to find their own source of revenue.
Right.
Then they don't have to tell you, jack shoot.
Well, it's just like this. It's the whole COVID-19 thing too, with the NIH and everybody else funding this gain of function, and the government stays hands off. But it's the idea they're creating this essentially bioweapons. But so that's neither here nor there. But I love what you're saying. But it begs the question that I want to ask about this, because it's the narrative, right? So you made a great point that like everybody has a cell phone, and so there's content and information that flows the government can't control. So how much of what we're seeing with the UFO disclosure, do you believe, this is your opinion obviously, do you believe is because they've got to stay somewhere in front of this flow of information they can't control, which is...
Yes, exactly.
Is people taking videos?
Yeah, that's it.
But how much...
I think that's it.
How much do you think of that then is a concerted effort to push a narrative as well?
That's a big part of it. Controlling the narrative is like numero uno. Always has been for anything.
Well, like, I mean, like the narrative that we're talking about, that now relates to this whole clergy NASA thing, which is one could posit is sort of this conditioning to prepare for this alien encounter or alien disclosure, right? Do you think?
I don't think NASA wanted the public to know that they were contracting with. I don't think they were trying to hide it necessarily, but I don't think that they wanted to highlight it, that they were contracting with the Center of Theological Inquiry in Princeton.
Interesting.
I don't think they really wanted that publicized precisely because of the effect it's having. So the Pentagon is in a little bit of a different position because this is just an inquiry from NASA, but the Pentagon has to deal with a national security threat. So it's a different ballgame with the Pentagon. I mean, everybody with a brain knows that if you have an unidentified object buzzing a battleship in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, that's a problem.
Yeah.
That's a problem. Now, even if it's not the Chinese and the Russians, I mean, it's a big problem if it's the Chinese and the Russians and they can do it with impunity, right? That's a big problem for us. But it's an even bigger problem if you have no idea who it is and the technology being deployed is vastly superior to anything that you have. That's a frustrating problem for the Pentagon because not only can you not stop it from happening, you don't have an answer. You don't have recourse. There's nothing you can tell the public to give them some kind of an assurance that we have a way to deter any kind of hostile activity that might be happening with these UAPs, as they're calling them now. And they're calling them UAPs because they just don't want the baggage that comes with you.
Now, some of these UAPs, sure, there absolutely could be aliens, extraterrestrials, interdimensional beings, whatever you want to call them, all those things. But I am convinced that there are some very, very sick, twisted, rich individuals out there that have their own craft, and they go out and do some really fucked up shit out there with those craft. And that's another thing. You keep hearing about Congress talking about, we're going to find these UFOs, we're going to make them, fucking bring them forward and release it to the public, blah, blah, blah. No, you fucking ain't, dude. If you got that kind of technology, you can literally do whatever you want. You can literally do whatever you want. I mean, literally, what are you going to do? You're going to go up and just say, hey, give me your shit? Fuck you, dude. They're going to fucking split and do another fucking reality, 10 years in the past, come back and fucking kill you in your sleep, come back, and then you never existed. You know what I mean? Like, they can do whatever the fuck they want with that tech.
FOs.
Right. Mm-hmm.
When you say UFO, you're dealing with a phenomenon that people understand is very likely extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional or ultra-terrestrial, whatever you like. But it's non-human is the point.
Yep, all of the above. It's all, shapeshifters, interdimensional beings, angels, UFOs, aliens, demons. It's all the fucking same. All of it. It's all the same phenomenon. If you put a label like shapeshifter on it, it basically explains it all.
So they changed the terminology to try and drop some of that baggage. And that's why I don't like to use the term unidentified aerial phenomenon, because it's not a different phenomenon than that's been happening for the last few decades. It's the very same phenomenon.
There's this another shell game.
Yeah.
Shell game. That's what they do. That's what they do. It's bureaucracy. But this is a very sinister level of bureaucracy because, as I said, we're not talking about the deep state. We're talking about the dumb state. Right. I just want to use that term again because I'm coining it here on your show.
Yeah, you've got multiple bureaucracies working together. I mean, not working together. Some of them are doing their own thing. I think some people think like it's a beast with many heads. So you think that because we're filming more with our cameras and our cell phones and we can see more, it's pushing the envelope, begging the question, we've got to do something about it. So they're going around trying to ask theologians like, okay, so how do we roll this out?
Well, that's NASA. NASA may or may not be colluding with elements of the Pentagon. They may or may not be. NASA may be finding its own information. They may be making their own discoveries.
No, they're not. No, they're not. NASA is literally ran by the CIA. CIA is all over it. I mean, they might have some people in NASA that think, like, oh, we're gonna find out what's going on and this and that, but really, no, they're just being led astray. They'll never have access to the real shit. Only those in power within the know will dish out that info to the people necessary.
Apart from the government, apart from the military-industrial complex, and realizing that disclosure is inevitable. And they also, being NASA, want to get in front of it, because if you're not in front of it, you're behind it. And if you're behind it, it makes you look like a liar. And
Okay, let me rephrase that. NASA publicly, like they're the face of NASA, the people that the people that are the face of NASA that we deal with in the public. Yeah, I mean, they're not going to know anything, but they'll sure act like they're getting down to the bottom of it.
Already seeing the distrust of our institutions. People are losing trust in institutions and are becoming disillusioned with nearly every institution you can think of, especially governmental institutions, but the media,